Supongamos que yo soy un paciente y ustedes son los estudiantes y los médicos. Y que yo sufro de lo que llamaríamos el delirio de que soy Dios. Tal vez quieren hacer algo conmigo o seguirme la corriente y hacerme preguntas. Estoy perfectamente dispuesto a someterme a su examen y a su tratamiento. Así que, adelante.
¿Cuándo te convertiste en Dios?
¿Ahora?
¿Te casarías conmigo?
No. Sí.
¿Tú duermes boca abajo o boca arriba?
Dormir es como la política. Uno duerme sobre el lado derecho. Cuando te cansas, duermes sobre el izquierdo. Cuando te cansas, duermes boca arriba. Y cuando de nuevo te cansas, boca abajo. Así es como gira el mundo.
¿Cómo te conviertes en Dios?
Uno no se convierte en Dios.
Yo también soy Dios.
Sí.
¿Somos entonces la misma persona?
No. Recuerda, 3 personas, un solo Dios.
¿Podrías contarnos sobre Satanás?
¿Que si podría hablarles sobre Satanás? Claro. Aunque el tema es un poco esotérico. Ya lo conté todo en el libro de Job, donde podrán ver que en el tribunal del cielo, Satanás es el fiscal del distrito. No es, como creen los cristianos, el enemigo del cielo y de la humanidad. Él es simplemente quien ve el lado malo de las cosas y hace el trabajo sucio. Por eso él vio a Job y se preguntó si el tipo era tan grande como parecía y sugirió que Dios nombrara un comité de investigación para averiguarlo. El comité hizo un trabajo a fondo, pero Satanás perdió el caso, pues al final se demostró que Job era un hombre honorable. Ahora tomen en cuenta que aunque pagamos el salario del fiscal del distrito, cuando se hace público un caso grande, la gente se pone del lado del más débil. Y el fiscal siempre tiene menos simpatía que el defensor, excepto en los juicios políticos. A la derecha de Dios, ya sabes que en los tribunales la defensa siempre está a la derecha del juez. Está nuestro único mediador y abogado, que es así como llamamos a Jesucristo, nuestro Señor. Así que allí están la defensa y la fiscalía. Y la función de Satanás es ser el fiscal. Hay mucho más que eso, porque antes de que todo esto empezara, igual que en una obra de teatro, antes de salir a escena, hicieron un acuerdo en la sala de espera, donde acordaron ciertas cosas, pero que solo las iban a revelar cuando bajara el telón al final de la obra.
¿Y Job también es Dios?
Sí, pero él no lo sabe.
¿Por qué te escondes de la vista de todos?
¿Por qué se esconden ustedes? Es por la misma razón.
¿Tiene el hombre libre albedrío?
El hombre tiene libre albedrío en la medida que sabe quién es. No de otra forma.
Si el hombre tiene libre albedrío para saber lo que es y es Dios, ¿estás diciendo que no eres más Dios que nosotros o que cualquier otra persona?
Correcto. No soy más Dios que cualquiera de ustedes.
¿Y solo tú tienes el poder de saber quién eres?
Eso ya es mucho decir, pero sí.
¿Qué no es Dios?
¿Qué no es Dios? No hay nada que no sea Dios.
¿Cómo te enteras de quién eres?
Fue como despertar de un sueño. Al rato uno empieza a sentir lo que yo llamaría la sensación de ¿no hemos estado aquí antes? Dándole a uno vueltas y más vueltas. Luego empiezas a preguntarte, ¿a dónde voy? Para responder esta pregunta, debes tratar de averiguar qué quieres. Así que me metí en esto a fondo. ¿Qué quiero que pase? Por supuesto, cuando te preguntas esto, empiezas a fantasear. Así que me puse a pensar hasta dónde podíamos llegar. Pronto me encontré en un gran lugar con un mecanismo fantástico, con botones para todas las cosas inimaginables que pudiera desear. Así que pasé bastante tiempo jugando con ellos. Pulsé y aquí estaba Cleopatra. Y así sucesivamente. Luego presioné este otro botón, música sinfónica. Cuando iba al sueño de todos de ser un sultán en su palacio, me di cuenta que había un botón que decía sorpresa. Lo presioné y aquí estoy.
¿El aburrimiento es un problema?
Sí, por supuesto, el aburrimiento es el problema. Es lo contrario de la creatividad. La energía de la creación es el yin. El lado yang de la energía es el aburrimiento. Todo, por supuesto, en el fondo es yin y yang. Si entiendes eso, no necesitas entender nada más.
Como Dios, ¿cuál es tu responsabilidad para mejorar el mal en el mundo?
Primero aclaro que soy responsable de cómo es el mundo. Si no fuera así, tendría que culpar a otra persona. No lo hago porque sé que bajo diferentes y cambiantes circunstancias sería correcto que yo fuera tan delincuente como los mayores delincuentes que han existido. Ahora, en cuanto a mejorar el mundo siempre está mejorando, incluso cuando está empeorando. Como una ola, sube y baja, sube y baja. No puede subir todo el tiempo, porque si lo hiciera, no sabríamos que ha subido. Así que parte del tiempo baja para que podamos saber cuándo sube. Si no supiéramos cuándo sube, sería como estar en un espacio donde todo fuera luz. No habría manchas negras en ese espacio, como un trozo de papel perfectamente en blanco. De la misma manera, estar en un espacio completamente negro también sería una especie de inconsciencia, sin nada de lo que escribir, porque nada sería diferente. Por eso, si todo está negro, no sabrás que está negro a menos que tengas algo blanco. Y si vas a estar blanco, no sabrás que es blanco a menos que tengas algo negro.
¿Por qué crees que debemos amarnos los unos a los otros? Si llegamos a ese punto, ¿no tendríamos estos altibajos? ¿Tendríamos que odiar?
Correcto, pero no es una enseñanza, es un koan, que es una palabra japonesa del budismo zen para describir un problema espiritual como suena una mano. Son problemas que se plantean a los que preguntan sobre su desarrollo espiritual. Como San Pablo lo señaló, los mandamientos se dan no con la expectativa de que se obedecerán, sino con la expectativa de que revelarán algo a quienes los escuchen.
¿Tienes entonces la idea de que todos somos Dios?
Sí.
¿Y qué hay del más allá? ¿Hay un cielo? ¿Hay un purgatorio? ¿Existe el infierno?
El más allá es, por supuesto, ahora. Pues si examinamos detenidamente, solo existe el ahora. Y si quieres convertirlo en un infierno, puedes hacerlo. Si quieres hacer de esto un cielo, puedes hacerlo. ¿Purgatorio? Purgatorio. Todo está aquí, siempre ha estado aquí, siempre estará.
¿Qué es la muerte?
La muerte es una ondulación de la conciencia. ¿Cómo sabrías que estás vivo si no hubieras estado muerto alguna vez? ¿Sí?
Si tienes presente la visión de Dios, igual que lo hacía Jesús, ¿por qué Él no necesitaba bienes materiales y tú sí los necesitas?
No es que no necesitara bienes materiales. Decían de San Juan Bautista que era un asceta. Pero de Jesús decían, ese se junta con glotones y bebedores de vino y anda comiendo y bebiendo. Cuando María derramó un ungüento precioso en sus pies y lo ungió, dijeron lo mismo que le dicen ahora a los feligreses, a los curas. ¿Para qué tanto gasto? Podríamos haber vendido esto por mucho dinero y habérselo dado a los pobres.
¿Esto es un problema?
Es un problema, seguro. Pero verás, en muchos sentidos, cuando llegas a estos problemas éticos tan profundos, donde no hay una decisión fácil en un sentido o en otro, debes mirar el problema desde el punto de vista de un artista. ¿Qué manera de hacer esto es en cierto sentido mejor? Es mejor salir con una gran explosión que con un lamento.
Isn't it curious? The more you give yourself away, the less you are truly seen. If the sun never set, we would cease to notice its light. If a bird sang without pause, its song would dissolve into noise. But the moment you step back, the moment you withdraw into silence, suddenly your presence takes on weight. People feel the shape of your absence, and in that very emptiness, you are valued again. This is one of life's delicious paradoxes. What is constant becomes invisible, what is scarce becomes precious. I don't mean trickery, nor the silly business of playing hard to get. That is just another mask. What I mean is the art of honoring your own presence, of moving with the same rhythm you find in the tides, in the waxing and waning of the moon. For even nature does not give itself all at once, nor all the time. Whatever is constant and without limit soon feels ordinary. Its gift lies not in burning without end, but in the rhythm of rising and falling, appearing and disappearing. If the sun never set, we would soon grow weary of its light and long for shadow. So it is with you. Your presence has power because it comes and goes like the tides that advance and recede, like love that breathes in closeness and in distance. Respect is born not from endless exposure, but from the spaces in between. Have you noticed how quickly generosity turns into expectation? The one who always says yes is soon taken for granted, while the one who withholds at times is cherished when they appear. It is not about virtue, but about balance. To step back is to remember your humanity. You are not a machine, but a rhythm, like the sea that ebbs and flows, like the moon that waxes and wanes. For life itself is not a straight line, but a dance of presence and absence. Isn't it strange? The moment you cease to be forever at hand, the relationship takes on new life. For when you are not always there, people no longer treat you as furniture in the room, but as a presence to be encountered. They lean closer. They listen. They treasure the passing moment. Even your silence, even your absence begins to speak. We only notice the sweetness of water when it grows scarce. When it gushes everywhere, it is wasted and ignored. But when it is drawn from a deep well, each sip is savored. So it is with your presence. If you flood the world with yourself, you wash away your value. But when you come and go like the tide, your presence refreshes like cool water in the desert. From childhood, we are taught to smile, to nod, to say yes, mistaking obedience for affection and availability for love. Yet love, like a garden, needs space to breathe. Too much rain drowns it, too much sun withers it. It flourishes in rhythm, not excess. Absence is not emptiness, but the interval that gives shape. Just as music is made not only of notes, but of the silence between them, so too love ripens in the dance of nearness and distance. Without the pauses, all dissolves into noise. Life is like a melody. And so if you never step back, never say no, you too become noise. Seen but not noticed, heard but not listened to. Value lies in the interval, the well-placed absence. This is not neglect, but rhythm. The tree does not bear fruit in every season. Fire does not burn forever. It must die down so it can be kindled again. Even breath itself depends on exhaling as well as inhaling. Why imagine you must give without rest? When you withdraw and return, your presence gathers weight, like the hush that makes the bells strike resound. And here is the paradox. By making yourself less available, you become more real. People meet your wholeness, not the fragments you scatter. Like the man who speaks rarely, it is not his words that are louder, but his silence that makes them precious. So it is with your presence. Given without pause, it is diluted. Held with rhythm, it gathers intensity. This is why stepping back is sometimes the most loving act of all. Look at love itself. Lovers who clutch too tightly smother the flame, while those who vanish altogether let the fire die. The art lies in rhythm, closeness and distance, voice and silence, embrace and release. Notice how the man who is seldom available is the one most carefully attended, not because his busyness is a virtue, but because his time carries weight. If he gives you a moment, it feels like a gift, for it has not been scattered like seed on barren ground. Contrast this with the one who is forever waiting, forever bending, whose presence is taken for granted precisely because it is always at hand. This is not a question of superiority, but of recognition. When you honor the worth of your own hours, others are compelled to honor them too. But if you spend them carelessly, the world will treat them as trifles. And so, to stop being always available is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the quiet refusal to leap at every summons, to patch every quarrel that is not yours, to serve as the eternal remedy for other people's restlessness. It is to stand rooted in yourself, and from that stillness to act when the moment is right. For your life is not meant to be endlessly consumed, but to be lived, richly, deeply, sincerely. And only from such fullness can you give in a way that nourishes, rather than exhausts. Now here is something quite remarkable. When you cease to be endlessly available, you begin to hear your own life again. For in forever tending to others, you drown the small secret music within. Your days are filled with clamor, but your soul remains unheard. Step back and suddenly you catch the whispers, the quiet callings, the subtle joys, the long-buried desires that rise like forgotten seeds breaking through the soil. To be available to yourself is the beginning of authenticity, and without authenticity, love itself becomes counterfeit. Every yes that betrays your own being is in truth a silent no, and from such denials only resentment can grow. There was a man who spent himself in the service of others, giving until he was emptied. Yet for all his sacrifice, he remained unseen. At last, exhausted, he stepped back. And only then did the world protest. They called him selfish, cold, neglectful. But slowly, something curious began to happen. In his absence, they began to feel the weight he had long carried. For the first time, his presence was no longer taken for granted, but respected. In stepping back, he had not lost love at all. He had opened the door for love to appear, where once there had only been convenience. So you see, to become less available is not an act of rejection, but of invitation. It is the invitation for others to wake up to your presence, and for you to wake up to yourself. For only in the open space between two beings can respect take root and love draw breath. When you are forever at hand, no one stops to wonder who you are or what you truly give. But when you withdraw, when you refuse to play the endless part, suddenly they must pause. They must look. And in that moment of seeing, the whole pattern begins to shift. Why, then, is this so hard? Because we are frightened. We imagine that a single no will banish love. We fear that if we step aside, we shall be forgotten. We tremble that if we honor our own worth, others will not. But ask yourself, if someone values you only so long as you are endlessly at their disposal, is that love or is it merely convenience? Much of our suffering, you see, is not caused by what others do to us, but by what we permit. Out of fear of displeasing, we stretch ourselves thin, we give beyond our means, we say yes when the heart cries no, and then we cloak this self-betrayal under the name of kindness. But it is no kindness to betray yourself. To give what you do not have is like offering an empty bowl. True kindness flows only from fullness, and fullness requires form. To cease being endlessly available is to honor that form. To say, I am human, I have rhythm, I have worth. And yes, some may drift away when you step back, but then you discover a deeper truth. They were not with you at all, but with the endless fountain they mistook you for. Better to be cherished for your reality than tolerated for your exhaustion. Better to lose those who drained you than to lose yourself altogether. And here again the paradox shows its face. Those who truly matter, those who truly love, will not vanish when you step back. They will bend with you, as trees bend with the wind. They will grow into the space you create, and in that very movement, the bond deepens. So when you cease to be forever at hand, you do not become less, you become more visible, more authentic, more real. You gather together the scattered fragments of yourself and return as a whole being, and life always bows to wholeness. For wholeness has its own gravity. It draws, it attracts, it commands respect without demanding it. The broken self clamors to be noticed, while the whole self is noticed without effort. You cease to be background noise and become the very music to which others listen. Picture yourself as a well. If all may draw without end, the waters will one day vanish, and both you and they will be left thirsty. But when the well is guarded, when it is given time to fill again from its hidden springs, then those who come to drink find refreshment. To withdraw at times, to cease being endlessly available, is simply to keep the waters of your life pure and flowing. This is not selfishness, but the very condition that makes giving possible. From a full well, the water is sweet. From a dry one, nothing can be drawn. Yet the world will not at first thank you for this. Those who were accustomed to your endless flow will call you selfish, accuse you of change, and indeed you have changed. You are no longer a tool to be used, but a being who gives from freedom. This unsettles those who lived upon your weakness, but it strengthens those who honor your strength. In time the numbers may grow fewer, but the bonds grow deeper. For love that is real does not fear your boundary. It bows to it. So then we come to this curious question. Who are you when you're not forever on call, forever answering the ring of the world? Who are you when you sit still, when you stop chasing, when you listen to the hum inside your own skull? Most of us forget, you see, because we're so busy being useful to others that we've misplaced ourselves. But in the silence, in that delicious nothing, you suddenly stumble upon yourself again. And far from being empty, it's wonderfully full. To withdraw is not to desert life, but to return to it. For in stepping back, you discover that life is like breathing in and out. If you only breathe out, you collapse. If you only give, you dry up. The rhythm of the tide is the rhythm of being. You see? It's the old paradox. In not seeking, things come to you. In not clutching, they remain. And so, curiously, when you stop demanding respect, people respect you. When you cease to be always available, you become truly present. You don't have to insist on your worth, you are it. So, the game is not about being endlessly busy, endlessly agreeable. It's about rhythm, sincerity, wholeness. Say yes when it's a real yes, say no when it's a real no. Step forward when you're full, step back when it's time to fill. That isn't selfishness. That's simply the wisdom of the dance. And then, as if by magic, life begins to keep the beat with you.
Why is it that so many people who are spiritually sensitive, who seem to have this inner knowing, this capacity for awareness, were born into families that were, shall we say, less than ideal, families that were dysfunctional, toxic, painful? And you might think, well, if the universe is so wise, if there's some kind of intelligence behind all this, why would it put these sensitive souls into such difficult circumstances? But what if I told you that this is not a mistake? What if the very thing you've been cursing, the very situation you've been trying to run from your entire life, is actually the most important, not because suffering is noble, but because sometimes the hardest soil produces the strongest trees. See, we have this notion that spiritual awakening should come through pleasant experiences, through meditation retreats, through reading wise books, through sitting quietly in beautiful gardens. And yes, these things can help. But the real awakening, the kind that shakes you to your bones, often comes through fire. It comes through difficulty. It comes through having everything you thought you needed stripped away until all that remains is what you truly are. Think about it this way. If you were born into a perfectly harmonious family, where everyone was kind and understanding, where love flowed freely and naturally, would you ever question anything? Would you ever look deeper? Would you ever have to develop that inner strength, that capacity to see through illusion? Probably not. You'd simply flow along with the current, never knowing there was anything else. But a toxic family, a dysfunctional family, they give you something else entirely. They give you friction. They give you problems that cannot be solved by ordinary means. They give you situations where you cannot simply go along with what everyone else is doing, because what everyone else is doing is clearly mad. And in that friction, in that impossibility, something begins to wake up. Let me put it to you another way. When a grain of sand gets into an oyster, it irritates, it hurts. The oyster cannot simply eject it. So what does the oyster do? It begins to coat the grain of sand with layers of nacre, slowly, patiently, and eventually that irritating grain becomes a pearl. The most beautiful thing the oyster creates comes from the thing that hurt it most. Your toxic family was the grain of sand. And you, through all your struggles, through all your pain, through all those years of trying to understand why they were the way they were, you've been creating. You've been developing something that people born into easy circumstances never have to develop. Wisdom. Real wisdom. Not the kind you read in books, but the kind that comes from having to figure out how to survive when everything around you is chaos. But here's where it gets really interesting. A toxic family doesn't just create problems. It creates a very specific kind of problem. It creates confusion about love. And this, strange as it sounds, is the gateway to awakening. You see, most people never question what love is. They simply accept whatever their family taught them. If their family was loving, they assume that's what love looks like. If their family was distant, they assume love is supposed to be distant. They never have to think about it. They never have to examine it. They simply repeat the pattern. But when you're born into a toxic family, you cannot do this. The pattern is so obviously broken that you cannot simply repeat it. You might try it first. Many do, but eventually something in you rebels. Something in you says, no, this isn't right. This isn't what love is supposed to be. And in that moment of rebellion, in that refusal to accept the pattern, you've taken the first step toward awakening, because now you must figure out for yourself what love actually is. You cannot rely on what you were taught. You cannot trust the programming. You have to go deeper. You have to look within. You have to discover what love means when it's not mixed up with manipulation, with control, with conditions, with all the garbage your family attached to it. Not to suffer, though there was suffering. Not to be damaged, though there was damage. But to be forced to wake up, to be forced to question, to be forced to look deeper than most people ever have to look. Now, I want to be clear about something. This doesn't mean the pain wasn't real. It doesn't mean what happened to you was okay. It doesn't mean you should feel grateful for abuse or neglect or whatever it was your family did. That would be missing the point entirely. The pain was real. The damage was real. What happened to you was not right. But here's the thing about reality. It doesn't care about our ideas of right and wrong. A tree doesn't grow straight by being kept in a greenhouse. It grows straight by being bent by the wind, by having to reach for the light, by having to develop deep roots to keep from being blown over. The wind is not kind. The wind is just wind. But without the wind, the tree would never develop strength. Your family was the wind. And you, whether you know it or not, have been developing roots that go very deep. Roots that most people never have to grow. And those roots, that depth, that's what makes you capable of understanding things that others cannot understand. Think about the people you know who had easy childhoods. Pleasant, comfortable, everything handed to them. What are they like now? I'm not saying they're bad people. But often, they have a certain shallowness to them, don't they? A certain inability to grasp the darker, deeper aspects of life. They live on the surface because they've never had to go beneath it. They believe in fairy tales because their life has been something of a fairy tale. But you cannot believe in fairy tales. You've seen behind the curtain. You know that families can be cruel, that parents can be selfish, that love can be twisted into something ugly. And while this knowledge was painful to acquire, it has made you real in a way that protected people never become. You've been stripped of illusions. And while most people spend their entire lives clinging to illusions, you don't have that luxury. You had to see things as they actually are. And seeing things as they actually are, that's the beginning of wisdom. That's the beginning of spiritual awakening. Now let's talk about something else. Something that might make you uncomfortable. Because here's a truth that's hard to accept. Your family wasn't just toxic to you. They were toxic because they were wounded. They were wounded because their parents were wounded. And their parents were wounded because their parents were wounded. It goes back and back and back, generation after generation, each one passing on the pain they received because they didn't know how to do anything else. You are the culmination of all that pain. All those generations of wounds, they all flowed into you. And you were the one who finally said, this stops here. You were the one who finally looked at the pattern and said, no more. I will not pass this on. I will not continue this cycle. And that is why you're different. That is why you were chosen, if you want to use that word. Not because you're special in some ego sense, but because your soul was strong enough to say, I will carry this weight. I will be the one who breaks the chain. Think about what that means. Your family, as toxic as they were not your enemies. They were your teachers. Terrible teachers, yes. Teachers who taught through pain rather than love. But teachers nonetheless. They showed you exactly what not to do. They showed you exactly what happens when people don't wake up, when they don't question, when they simply repeat the patterns they inherited. And by showing you what not to do, they forced you to figure out what to do. They forced you to become conscious. They forced you to choose. Because you see, that's the real gift. Choice. Most people never have to choose how to be. They simply are what their family made them. They're automatons, robots, running on programming they never questioned. But you had to choose. You had to consciously decide what kind of person you wanted to be. You had to consciously decide what you believed love was. You had to consciously decide what values you would hold, what kind of relationships you would have, what kind of life you would build. Nothing was automatic, nothing was given. Everything had to be chosen. And in that choosing, in that constant, difficult work of choosing, you became awake. You became conscious. You became, in the truest sense, yourself. Not what your family wanted you to be. Not what society expected you to be, but what you, in your deepest knowing, chose to be. Now here's where people often get confused. They think awakening means being happy all the time, being peaceful all the time, being detached from everything. But that's not awakening. That's just another kind of sleep, another kind of escape. Real awakening means seeing clearly. It means understanding the patterns. It means recognizing that your family's behavior was not about you. It was never about you. It was about them, their wounds, their pain, their inability to love, because they had never been loved properly themselves. And when you see this, really see it, something extraordinary is happening. The anger begins to dissolve. Not because you force it to, not because you think you should forgive, but because you finally understand. You understand that they were not villains. They were wounded people acting out their wounds, unable to do anything else because no one ever showed them another way. Does this mean you have to have a relationship with them? No. Does this mean you have to trust them? Absolutely not. Does this mean you have to subject yourself to their toxicity? Not at all. Understanding is not the same as allowing abuse. Compassion is not the same as being a doormat. You can understand someone completely and still choose to stay away from them. You can have compassion for their wounds and still protect yourself from their behavior. These are not contradictions. These are simply different levels of understanding. The truly awakened person knows this. They know that protecting yourself is not the same as hating. They know that setting boundaries is not the same as being cruel. They know that you can wish someone well while also wishing them well from a great distance. And this is the freedom that comes from having been born into a toxic family. You learn to love without attachment. You learn to care without being consumed. You learn to see people clearly without judgment. Because you've had to do all these things with your own family. People from healthy families, they often struggle with this. They feel guilty for setting boundaries. They feel selfish for prioritizing their own needs. They confuse love with sacrifice, with enduring pain, with putting up with behavior that damages them. Because that's what they were taught. But you learned a different lesson. You learned that real love includes boundaries. That real love sometimes means saying no. That real love sometimes means walking away. Not with anger, not with hatred, but simply with the clear understanding that this situation is not good for you, and you have every right to choose situations that are. This is spiritual maturity. This is what most people spend lifetimes trying to learn. And you learned it early because you had no choice. Your family gave you an advanced course in what love is not. And in learning that, you also learned what love is. Let me share something with you. The most spiritually awake people I've ever known, they all had difficult childhoods. All of them. And for years I wondered why. Why does suffering seem to be the common denominator in awakening? And then I realized it's not about the suffering. It's about the questioning that suffering produces. When life is easy, you don't question. You don't have to. But when life is hard, when it doesn't make sense, when the people who are supposed to love you hurt you instead, you start asking the big questions. Why am I here? What is this all about? What is real and what is illusion? These questions, these are the questions that lead to awakening. Your toxic family pushed you to ask these questions early. They pushed you to look for meaning in a situation that seemed meaningless. They pushed you to find love in yourself because you couldn't find it in them. They pushed you to develop an inner life because the outer life was too painful. And in developing that inner life, in turning inward because the outer world was so harsh, you found something most people never find. You found your true self, not the self your family wanted you to be, not the self society expected you to be, but the self you actually are, beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the wounds, beneath all the stories. This self, this true self, it was always there. But most people never discover it because they never have to look for it. They're too busy living on the surface, too busy being who everyone expects them to be. But you had to dig deep because the surface was unbearable. And in digging deep, you struck gold. Now here's the final piece of this understanding. Your awakening is not just for you. It's for everyone. It's for your family, even though they may never acknowledge it. It's for the generations that came before you, because in healing yourself, you heal the ancestral line. And it's for the generations that will come after you, because you've broken the pattern, you've stopped the cycle. You've said, this madness ends with me. This is what it means to be spiritually awake. It's not about being better than others. It's not about being special. It's about being awake enough to see the patterns, strong enough to break them, and brave enough to choose differently even when it's difficult. Your toxic family was the darkness that forced you to find your own light. They were the problem that forced you to become the solution. They were the question that forced you to find the answer. And the answer you found, the light you discovered, it's not just for you. So yes, being born into a toxic family is a gift. Not because the toxicity was good, but because it forced you to become who you really are. It forced you to wake up when you might have slept through your entire life. It forced you to question when you might have simply accepted. It forced you to choose when you might have simply followed. And now, having done all that work, having climbed that mountain, having discovered that light within yourself, you stand as proof that transformation is possible, that breaking cycles is possible, that awakening is possible. Not despite the difficulties, but because of them. This is the great gift. This is why you were placed exactly where you were placed. Not to suffer, but to awaken. Not to be broken.
There is a strange feeling that follows us through life, even when we seem to have all the things we once wished for. You might notice it on quiet evenings, when everything is finally still, the bills are paid, the kitchen is clean, the lights are soft, and yet something inside you whispers, there must be more. It is not greed, not exactly. It is an ache, an almost sacred restlessness, as if the mind refuses to believe that satisfaction could ever be simple. We are taught from childhood that money is the measure of safety, that to be rich is to be free. But the odd thing is that very few people who are surrounded by abundance ever truly feel free. They are anxious about losing it, suspicious of those who want it, and haunted by the idea that it might one day stop flowing. So even when the river of wealth runs wide, they still feel thirsty. You see, money is not a thing we hold. It is a story we tell. A story about control, about certainty, about being on the right side of fate. But the story keeps changing, and we keep rewriting it. One day, you tell yourself that if you could only earn a little more, you'd finally relax. The next, you have more, and you find new ways to be tense. You upgrade the dream, not because you need to, but because you no longer know how to stop chasing. This is the subtle tragedy of modern life. You can have comfort without peace. You can have wealth without trust. You can have options and still be trapped. And you can spend your entire existence trying to feel what cannot be bought, the quiet assurance that you are already complete. It is curious that the richer a society becomes, the less satisfied its people seem to feel. We accumulate things faster than we can enjoy them. We rush to consume experiences like travelers who are afraid their passports will expire. Even leisure becomes a form of work. We must prove that we are happy, prove that we are fulfilled, prove that our success was not a mistake. And yet, the old problem persists. The feeling of lack. A man who owns a house may still lie awake, worrying about losing it. A woman who finally earns her dream income may suddenly fear that it won't be enough next year. It is never the numbers in the bank that trouble us. It is the belief that we are still incomplete, that someone, somewhere, is ahead. But what does it mean to be rich? Is it to have more than others? Or is it to need less? You can only feel wealth by contrast. If everyone had 1 million, no one would feel rich. If no one had a home, even a single room would feel like a palace. Our sense of abundance is not determined by possession, but by perception, by the game of comparison we unconsciously play every day. The trouble with comparison is that it never ends. There will always be someone who has gone farther, who has achieved sooner, who seems to float through life with less friction than you. But you never see the whole story. You see the highlight reel, the house, the smile, the success, not the anxiety behind it. And so we keep reaching, we keep pushing, we keep moving the goalpost just beyond the horizon, because stopping feels dangerous, almost shameful, as though contentment were a kind of failure. But you cannot chase peace and catch it. You can only allow it. Money is the same. The more you treat it as something to trap, the faster it runs from you. Because money, like life itself, moves in cycles. It flows in, it flows out, it circulates. And when you grip it too tightly, you stop its rhythm. If you truly look, you'll notice that every major financial decision you've ever made was not just about money, it was about what money symbolized. Security, recognition, freedom, love, control. Every purchase, every job, every dream of someday was a coded way of saying, I want to feel safe. But the great paradox is that the moment you tie your safety to something that can fluctuate, you guarantee your insecurity. This is why even wealthy people rarely feel rich. They have built their peace on sand. The market shifts, the company falters, the economy trembles, and the heart trembles with it. But what if you discovered that the sense of richness you're longing for has nothing to do with the balance in your account and everything to do with your relationship to enoughness? Enough is a quiet word. It does not shout like success or sparkle like wealth. It whispers. It says, you may stop now. But the modern mind is deaf to that whisper, because stopping looks too much like losing. We have confused contentment with complacency. Yet the only way to ever feel truly rich is to recognize that you already possess the only wealth that matters, the capacity to be here now without needing the next thing to make it worthwhile. You may have noticed that the richest moments of your life were never the most expensive ones. They were the mornings when the sun touched your window at just the right angle, the laughter that cost nothing, the meal that tasted better because you had someone to share it with. These are not moments of scarcity. They are proof that wealth was never the issue. Attention was. Attention is the new currency of our age. What you give your focus to, you empower. If your attention is constantly orbiting what's missing, then even a fortune will feel fragile. But if your attention settles into what is already here, then even the simplest life will feel abundant. We often think money will finally make us present, that once the bills are gone, the debt erased, the worry silenced, then we will relax. But life has a strange sense of humor. It gives you peace the moment you stop waiting for peace to be purchased. The moment you stop making contentment conditional on external gain, you realize that freedom was never hiding in the bank. It was hiding in your breath. It is a peculiar madness to believe that the value of life depends on the size of one's savings. Yet most people spend their best years trading time, the one thing they can never recover, for figures that exist only as digital ghosts on a screen. The irony is exquisite. We sacrifice the living moment for symbols of potential moments. You do not live in the future that your money promises. You live here, in this pulse, in this breath, and when that breath is over, you cannot spend what you have stored. But the culture around us whispers endlessly, you must prepare, you must accumulate, you must secure yourself. We build whole identities on this premise. The worker becomes his salary, the entrepreneur becomes her valuation, the artist becomes the market's approval, and in the process, we forget the original reason we sought wealth in the first place, to be free to live. Freedom cannot be bought. It is a realization, not a transaction. You may have noticed that those who spend their lives chasing financial freedom rarely find it, because the chase becomes the prison. The moment they reach one target, another appears. They're like sailors who keep moving the island on the map, always rowing toward a shore that never existed. To understand this, you must first see that money is not evil, nor is it sacred. It is neutral, pure energy, pure potential. It becomes poison only when you project your fears and hopes upon it, when you treat it as the medicine for every insecurity, it amplifies the sickness. But when you treat it as a tool, a rhythm, a movement of life itself, it begins to flow naturally again. Most people do not have a money problem, they have a meaning problem. They believe that by accumulating enough, they will one day escape uncertainty. But uncertainty is not an obstacle, it is the very texture of existence. You cannot buy your way out of it. You can only dance with it. Think of the ocean. The waves rise and fall. No one wave lasts forever, yet the ocean remains whole. Money is like that. It rises and falls in the tides of your life. Some seasons bring abundance, others require trust, but both are necessary for the rhythm to stay alive. You cannot have the flow without the ebb. Yet our minds resist this natural movement. We want to lock the river in a vault. We build dams of worry, hoarding, and fear, and then we wonder why we no longer feel the joy of its movement. You might feel it too, that heavy sense that you can never rest, because if you rest, the flow will stop. But it doesn't. It only stops when you stop trusting it. There are people who have very little, yet move through life with quiet confidence. Their peace is not because they are ignorant of difficulty, but because they are intimate with it. They have learned that wealth does not guarantee security any more than poverty guarantees despair. What matters is the relationship not between you and your money, but between you and your own sense of enoughness. You may have enough and still feel poor because you have not learned to feel what you already possess. The mind is trained to seek, not to notice. It treats satisfaction as a sign to move the target farther. That is why the feeling of richness cannot arise from what you own. It arises from how deeply you allow yourself to be owned by this present moment. And that is the great secret. You cannot hold wealth, but wealth can hold you when you stop demanding that it make you feel safe. When you stop trying to make money your savior, you begin to see that life has already been carrying you all along. If you look closely, every moment of your life has been financed by something far deeper than currency, the sheer generosity of existence itself. The sunlight that costs nothing, the breath that renews itself, the people who appear when you least expect it. These are not transactions, they are testaments that abundance has always been the ground beneath your feet. The reason you never feel rich is not that you lack something material, but that you have mistaken the symbol of wealth for the experience of it. And until that illusion is seen through, you could fill every account you own and still wake in the night wondering what's missing. So, pause for a moment. Feel the air moving in and out. Notice that it does not charge rent for entry. Notice that the stars still shine whether your stocks go up or down. Notice that life, in its strange and quiet way, has never stopped providing what is essential. Perhaps that is where real richness begins, in remembering that you were never meant to feel rich by having more, but by realizing that you are already part of something that cannot be owned. At some point, we must ask ourselves what it truly means to have enough. The question sounds simple, almost childish, but it hides the key to our deepest confusion. Enough is not a number, it is a relationship. You cannot measure it with a calculator because it depends on something that cannot be counted, the quality of your awareness. You see, life has never been about accumulation. It has always been about participation. When you are fully participating in the dance of existence, wealth is irrelevant. Whether you are sitting in a palace or beneath a tree, the sense of completeness comes from the same place, the unbroken presence of consciousness itself. But when you forget that, when you identify only with the fragments you can own or display, you feel divided from life, and the divided self can never feel rich. Consider for a moment how the idea of money arose. Once, there was only exchange. A fisherman traded his catch for the farmer's grain. The potter gave a bowl for a loaf of bread. It was a rhythm of giving and receiving, balanced by trust. But as soon as we invented symbolic wealth, the symbol became more important than the exchange. The coin replaced the conversation. the note replaced the handshake. We began to value not the act of giving, but the accumulation of the tokens that represented it. And so humanity found itself in an odd paradox. We created money to make life easier, but then made life revolve around money. We built systems that reward hoarding instead of sharing, growth instead of sufficiency, profit instead of peace. And yet the truth has not changed. You cannot take a single cent with you when you go. The wealth that truly matters is the kind you can still feel when everything else is gone. When you look around, you may notice that people often confuse abundance with excess. Abundance is the experience of fullness. Excess is the refusal to stop. Abundance nourishes, excess intoxicates. One expands your awareness, the other narrows it until you can no longer taste what you consume. A man in a small home can live abundantly if his heart is spacious. A man in a mansion can live in poverty if his soul is cramped by fear. But the problem is not greed, not really. It is confusion. We have mistaken the visible symbols of wealth for the invisible feeling of wholeness they were meant to point toward. And so we keep grasping for more, like a person trying to hold sunlight in their hands. Real richness begins the moment you stop trying to store light and start learning to see it. To feel rich is to recognize that the miracle is not that you possess things, but that things exist at all. That you are here, breathing, conscious, surrounded by textures and sounds and colors that no amount of currency could ever recreate. Look closely at the smallest details, the way the steam curls from your morning tea, the quiet rhythm of your footsteps on the floor, the warmth of someone's voice saying your name. These are not luxuries. These are wealth, but because we are taught to think of life as a ledger, we keep translating these moments into costs and gains. How much did it take? What did I earn? What did I lose? As long as the mind is caught in that arithmetic, it cannot see the truth that the value of a moment is not in what it costs, but in how deeply it is lived. You can spend your entire life chasing security and die without ever feeling safe, or you can discover here and now that safety is not the absence of risk, but the willingness to be present with it. This is why the truly wealthy are not those who have conquered uncertainty, but those who have made peace with it. They understand that life is not meant to be controlled, but experienced. The richest people in spirit are not those who hold everything tightly, but those who have learned to let everything go again and again without losing the capacity to trust. There is a freedom that appears only when you no longer demand that the world guarantee you anything. It is the freedom of being able to breathe without bargaining. The freedom of knowing that your worth does not rise and fall with the market or with the approval of others. When you realize this, something subtle shifts. The pursuit of wealth turns inward. You begin to invest, not in possessions, but in perception. You become interested in the quality of your attention, how present you are when you speak, how open you are when you listen, how generous you are when you act. That is the real portfolio of the spirit. You see, all along, life has been offering you dividends of awareness. Every challenge, every failure, every success, all of it has been teaching you how to wake up. But you cannot cash those lessons in a bank. Their value is in their transformation. And so the question is not how to make more, but how to mean more. How to let your actions carry the weight of awareness. How to allow even the simplest gesture, a smile, a meal, a moment of silence, to become a declaration of gratitude for the wealth that is already surrounding you. People often ask, but what about ambition? Should I not strive? Of course you should strive, but know what you are striving for. There is nothing wrong with earning money, creating art, or building a company. What matters is whether your work is an expression of love or a performance of fear. When it comes from love, it expands you. When it comes from fear, it drains you. A man who works from love is not working for security. He is working because he is alive. He moves with the current of life instead of against it. He understands that what he creates is not for possession, but participation. The reward is not the result, but the doing. And when you truly work in that spirit, money ceases to be an obsession and becomes a natural byproduct of energy well spent. It flows to you not as proof of worth, but as a reflection of alignment. The difficulty, of course, is that we are surrounded by noise, a culture built on convincing us that we are always one purchase away from happiness. Every advertisement whispers the same sermon. You are not enough, but we can sell you the missing piece. And because we are tired, uncertain, and hungry for relief, we believe it. We keep feeding a hunger that cannot be satisfied, because it is not physical, it is spiritual. To be spiritually hungry is not wrong. It is the first step toward awakening. But to confuse spiritual hunger with material lack is to wander forever. The moment you understand that what you crave is not more, but meaning, everything changes. You stop trying to fill the silence with noise or the stillness with motion. You begin to see that the discomfort of not enough is simply the invitation to meet yourself more deeply. It is not a curse, but a doorway. The moment you stop running from it, it opens. To feel rich, then, is to return to that inner stillness and find that you have never truly been poor. That the wealth you sought outside was always an echo of the abundance within. You realize that your entire life has been funded by something infinite, the same mystery that animates the trees, the rivers, the stars. It is a strange discovery to make because it dissolves the game entirely. You can still earn, still build, still plan for the future, but now you do it with lightness. You are no longer trying to prove your worth, you are simply expressing it. The anxiety of comparison fades, the compulsion to outdo disappears. What remains is participation, a pure willingness to live. And when you live like that, money becomes what it was meant to be, a servant, not a master. It moves through you as easily as breath, supporting what needs to unfold, then leaving when it is time. You trust that it will return when it is needed, because you are no longer clinging to its form. You are rooted in the deeper flow beneath it, the pulse of life itself. Imagine for a moment that you were suddenly invisible to society. No one could see your possessions, your titles, or your success. What would remain of you then? That remainder, the essence that cannot be measured or marketed, that is your true wealth. Everything else is temporary. There will come a day when your last transaction is complete, your last ambition satisfied, your last coin spent. And in that moment, all that will matter is whether you have learned how to be rich in presence, whether you can meet the final silence with gratitude instead of fear. If you have lived in constant hunger for more, death will feel like theft. But if you have lived in awareness of enough, death will feel like completion. The world will always offer you reasons to worry. The market will fall, prices will rise, the future will tremble. But the one thing that cannot be shaken is the realization that wealth was never outside you. It was the consciousness through which you perceived the world. It was the gratitude that transformed necessity into blessing, repetition into ritual, ordinary life into sacredness. You are not poor because you lack things. You are poor only when you forget how to see. So, learn to see again. See the way the morning light filters through the curtain. See the faces of those you love. See the fleeting moments that slip between your plans. They are all pieces of gold, scattered freely across the day. You don't have to own them, you only have to notice them. One day, you will look back and realize that the moments you thought were small were the richest of all. That the peace you chased through decades of work was already waiting for you, quietly, in the pause between breaths. To feel rich is not to escape life's uncertainty, but to bow to it. to say yes to each wave as it comes, and yes again when it goes. To know that what is yours will always find its way to you, because you are already part of the same current that carries everything else. And when that realization settles in your bones, you no longer ask, "Do I have enough?" You simply whisper, "I am enough." That is where the chase ends. That is where wealth begins. It's strange, isn't it? How the world convinces you that freedom has a price tag, that somewhere on the other side of financial success, there waits a version of you who finally breathes without fear. You picture it often, that effortless life, with no more bills to worry about, no debts to calculate, no need to chase anyone or anything. Yet when you finally taste a glimpse of that comfort, something unexpected happens. Instead of peace, you feel a quiet emptiness. You look at your bank account and realize that the numbers may have changed, but the restlessness within you hasn't. What most people call financial freedom is often just a more comfortable form of slavery. You become free from the old anxieties, only to replace them with new ones. Now the question isn't how do I survive, but how do I stay ahead? How do I protect what I've built? How do I make sure it doesn't all vanish? And so, even in abundance, you worry. Even in wealth, you tremble. Money, after all, is an abstraction, a symbol of value that we mistake for value itself. The illusion begins when you start believing that money is a source of freedom rather than a tool. In truth, it is simply a measure of human trust, a shared agreement, a token for the exchange of energy, skill, and time. But because we live in a world that worships measurement, we mistake the symbol for the substance. We try to buy freedom the same way we buy comfort, not realizing that true freedom can't be purchased. It can only be perceived. If you pay close attention to people who have made their fortune, you'll often notice the peculiar anxiety that follows them. It's not the same fear of scarcity they had before, but a subtler one, a fear of losing identity. For so long, they were defined by their pursuit. Their dreams were driven by struggle, by the next milestone. When the pursuit ends, they often don't know who they are without it, and so they keep running. They keep accumulating. They turn life into a game of endless increase, unaware that they've become prisoners to their own success. The human mind has an astonishing ability to normalize everything it touches. That's why people who once dreamed of earning a few $100s a week now can't sleep unless they're chasing thousands. We move the goalposts every time we reach them, not because we're greedy, but because the ego can't survive without pursuit. The ego lives in the distance between where you are and where you think you should be. So when money removes that distance, the ego quietly creates a new one. That's why you might have noticed, even after you reach a certain level of comfort, a quiet voice still says, "It's not enough." It's the same voice that once said, "When I get there, I'll finally be happy." But happiness doesn't wait at the end of the road. It exists only in the act of walking. The tragedy of modern ambition is that it teaches people to run faster toward a finish line that doesn't exist. Money itself isn't evil. It's neutral, like water or fire. It can nurture or destroy, depending on how it's held. But the human tendency to attach identity to money, that's where the suffering begins. Because once you believe your worth depends on your wealth, every fluctuation in your fortune feels like a fluctuation in your soul. When your net worth rises, you feel strong. When it falls, you feel small. And in that fragile dance between pride and panic, you lose sight of the truth. You were never meant to be measured in digits. Money is a form of play, a beautifully sophisticated game that humanity created for itself. The problem is that we've forgotten it's a game. We treat it as survival. We measure human success by the numbers printed on a screen, and we wonder why everyone feels so anxious. Because when play becomes pressure, joy turns into tension. You can see it everywhere. The man in a suit staring at his phone in a restaurant, unable to taste his meal. The woman scrolling through investment charts late at night, her eyes dim from the glow of her own ambition. The young person glued to videos about financial freedom, yet living in constant comparison with people who seem freer than them. We've turned freedom into another commodity to be marketed, sold, and envied. We think, if I can just make more, then I'll be free. But freedom that depends on a future condition isn't freedom. It's postponement. It's a subtle way of saying, I can't live now because I haven't earned it yet. And this is where the illusion deepens. Because when you finally get there, when the bills are paid and the debts are gone, you suddenly realize that you still don't know how to rest. You've trained your mind to chase, not to be still. And so, when there's nothing left to chase, you feel uneasy. You start new projects, new goals, new investments, anything to keep the machine running. You can buy time, but you can't buy presence. You can buy comfort, but not contentment. And yet, most people spend their entire lives trying to buy the things that can only be found in stillness. Wealth without awareness is a trap. When you forget to enjoy life, money simply becomes a more elaborate way to distract yourself from it. You can't really get something for nothing, because you can't really get anything at all. Life isn't about getting, it's about being. We misunderstand abundance. We think it means more possessions, more digits, more influence. But in truth, abundance is the ability to experience the present moment without resistance. It's the peace that arises when you no longer need anything to feel complete. Imagine you were born in a world where money didn't exist, only trade, cooperation, and trust. Would you still feel poor? Or would you see that the true currency of life is time, attention, and love? Those three are the only forms of wealth that never lose value, never suffer inflation, and never decay when shared. Yet those are the very things we trade away for symbols. You might say, but money gives me freedom. And yes, it can give you choices, but choices are not freedom. Freedom is the ability to choose without fear. It is a state of mind, not a state of account. You can have billions and still feel trapped in comparison, or have very little and feel vast inside. The most powerful people in the world are not those who can buy anything they want, but those who need nothing to feel whole. That is why the mystics, monks, and philosophers across history have always seemed strangely serene, not because they rejected money, but because they saw through it. They understood that the desire for control is the root of all bondage, and money is one of the cleverest illusions of control that humanity ever invented. So much of modern life is built around the fear of loss. We insure everything, save everything, protect everything, as if immortality could be purchased in monthly payments. But what if true freedom lies not in what you secure, but in what you can release? We suffer from a peculiar form of madness. We spend our lives earning money to live, and then forget to live while earning it. Think of how many moments are lost to worry. How much joy is postponed because it didn't seem practical at the time. We tell ourselves that one day, when everything is in order, we'll finally relax. But that day never arrives, because life was never designed to be in order. It was designed to be experienced. To the person who has chased success all their life, the greatest challenge isn't earning more, it's learning how to stop. To sit quietly in the abundance they already have and realize that peace doesn't come from possession, but perception. The pursuit of wealth can be beautiful when it's creative, when it's done as an art, a dance with life, not a struggle against it. But when it becomes obsession, it distorts your entire relationship with existence. Because in your attempt to own the world, you forget that you're already part of it. You forget that every sunset, every breath, every heartbeat is wealth beyond measure. The truth is not to condemn money, but to reveal its limits. Do not seek yourself in what you earn, because if your identity depends on your success, then even when you win, you lose. You become like a man clutching water. The tighter you hold, the less you have. And so the paradox remains. The more you chase freedom through money, the more you bind yourself to it. The moment you believe you need it to be happy, you've already surrendered your freedom to it. But if you can see through the illusion, if you can learn to play with money instead of worshiping it, something miraculous happens. You begin to experience wealth as flow rather than possession. You begin to move through life with lightness rather than tension. You begin to realize that freedom isn't something to achieve, but something you've always had. And that realization, once seen, can never be unseen. There comes a point in every person's life when they must ask a frighteningly honest question. What am I really chasing? For years, you've called it security, success, stability. But beneath those words, there is something deeper. A longing not for money, but for meaning. For a feeling of safety that no number seems to provide. For a sense of being enough. And yet, the tragedy is that you already are. You cannot get to happiness. You can only be it. That is what so many forget. They keep trying to arrive at a place that was never elsewhere. Freedom is not a destination. It is a quality of awareness, a way of seeing life without being dominated by the need to control it. Money, in itself, is simply condensed energy. It amplifies who you already are. If you are anxious, it gives you more things to be anxious about. If you are free, it gives you more ways to express that freedom. That is why some people become miserable when they become wealthy. The noise inside them was never addressed, only magnified. But once you understand this, something begins to shift. You start to see that your relationship with money mirrors your relationship with life itself. The same way you grasp for control in your finances, you grasp for certainty in your future. The same way you hoard wealth out of fear, you hoard emotions out of insecurity. And when you let go of one, you begin to soften toward the other. The art of freedom is not about how much you have, but how lightly you can hold it. When you stop trying to possess everything, you realize you already belong to everything. That is the essence of effortless action. The understanding that wealth, like water, flows best when it is not forced. Think of a river. You can swim with it, or you can exhaust yourself fighting against it. The current does not care whether you resist. It keeps moving. And so, the wise person learns to float. They allow wealth to come and go like the tide, understanding that both movement and stillness are part of the same ocean. In our culture, we celebrate accumulation. We admire those who climb, collect, and conquer. But rarely do we honor those who release. Yet, release is where true power hides, because only the one who can let go fully is the one who is no longer afraid. There is a profound freedom in being able to say, if it comes, good. If it goes, good. Imagine if you could live like that, not careless, but deeply trusting. To live so completely in the present that you stop postponing peace for a tomorrow that never arrives. You see, money can only bring freedom to those who are already free inside. To everyone else, it becomes another chain. A golden one, perhaps, but still a chain. Because the moment you say, I will relax when I have enough, you have made your peace conditional on something external, something the world can always take away. The only real wealth is inner stillness. When you can sit in silence with nothing to prove, nothing to protect, and still feel whole, that is when you have arrived. And strangely enough, it is from that very stillness that abundance flows. Because when you stop chasing, you create space for things to find you. There is a principle of reversal in life. The harder you try to hold on, the faster things slip through your fingers. But when you relax your grip, when you allow, you begin to notice that life naturally supports you. Opportunities arise, people appear, synchronicities unfold, not because you forced them, but because you stop resisting them. Think of a tree. It does not strain to grow, yet it grows. It does not demand fruit, yet fruit appears. It simply exists in alignment with what it is, and in that alignment, abundance becomes inevitable. The same law applies to you. If you were to measure your wealth not in dollars, but in awareness, how rich would you be? How present are you to your own life? How deeply do you experience each moment before it slips away? Most people trade this awareness for the illusion of progress. They live in a constant state of not yet, always preparing to live, but never arriving. And yet, life keeps happening, not later, but now. That is the ultimate irony. We try to buy more time, forgetting that time is the only currency we can never increase. Every moment spent chasing becomes a moment unseen, unlived, unappreciated. But when you realize that this very moment, this breath, this heartbeat, is the only enough that ever existed, something inside you softens. You no longer fight the flow. You start to dance with it. The meaning of money is in its movement. It is not meant to be hoarded, but circulated. It is energy in motion. And when you let it move, it brings life. When you freeze it, it begins to die. The same is true for joy, for love, for creativity. These things only remain alive when shared. That is why generosity has always been the mark of a truly wealthy spirit. Because generosity is not about giving away money. It is about releasing attachment. It is saying, I trust life enough to let this go. And the universe, being an echo of that same trust, often responds in kind. Real wealth does not come from possessing more, but from needing less. You become infinitely rich the moment you stop trying to compensate for your sense of lack. You realize that all this time, you were never chasing money, you were chasing yourself. You were searching for the feeling of being enough. And the moment you recognize that you already are, the chase ends. This does not mean you abandon ambition or stop working. It simply means you stop confusing effort with worth. You work not to become something, but to express what you already are. That shift, subtle as it seems, transforms everything. Suddenly, your actions feel lighter. You stop competing and start creating. You stop worrying about outcomes because you understand that what truly matters was never at stake. The real purpose of money is play, to facilitate exchange, creativity, and connection, not to define identity. When you begin to treat it as play, you participate in the great rhythm of life without losing yourself in it. You can work hard, earn much, even enjoy luxury, but you no longer confuse the mask for the face. Look around the world and you will notice that the happiest people are not necessarily those who have the most, but those who are most alive. They use money like musicians use notes, as a means of expression, not measurement. They can laugh at losses, smile through uncertainty, and still trust the unfolding of things. You may not control every rise and fall of fortune, but you can always control your relationship to it. You can choose to see money as movement rather than meaning. You can choose to treat wealth as a guest rather than a god. The moment you stop believing that happiness lies somewhere beyond the next financial milestone, you begin to wake up. You realize that the true treasure of life is not stored in banks, but in awareness, in the ability to see beauty in what is already here. Imagine living from that space. You still earn, still plan, still invest, but you no longer suffer through it. You no longer chase freedom, you express it. Because the free person is not one who has escaped the system, but one who no longer believes it defines them. Wealth and freedom are not opposites. They only appear that way when you forget who you are. When you remember, everything becomes simple. You earn when you need to, you rest when you can, and you allow life to unfold in its rhythm. And then, quite mysteriously, abundance finds its way back to you. Not because you demanded it, but because you finally stopped blocking it. You stopped clutching at life and started trusting it. The fool chases freedom through control. The wise simply realize that control was never needed. And in that realization, you discover the most profound truth of all.